the past. I'm Louis Alexander. I was a preaching, teaching pastor here for about 5 years. And some of you know, my wife and I, about 4 years ago, moved to Belize. And she was full-time down there, running a little resort called Buried Treasure Beach that we have there in Placencia. And I was just commuting back and forth. Some of you drive to work. I just took 3 planes to get to the office is all. But then COVID came, and that kind of shut down the business. And I had to come back here and work a full-time JOB again. Any of you have a JOB out there? You work for a living, turn the lights on. I've been with the same company for about 30 years, but I was just commuting to get there. Now we're back here in Leander, pretty much full-time, and I started helping my buddy start a church over in Round Rock. But when Daryl asked me to come, because he and Nikki are on their 26th wedding anniversary, woohoo, they're in Hawaii, I was really happy to jump at the chance. Was in Gerald last week. Good to see friends there, and now back with you, and glad to be here. A number of years ago, Daryl and I talked about preaching through the Bible in 5 years, and really excited you guys are in Ecclesiastes, a great book. The wisdom literature. I love the wisdom literature. My PhD is Old Testament, and studied wisdom literature with a couple of theologians over in Oxford. And so love this topic. In the book of Ecclesiastes, a lot of the wisdom literature was attributed to Solomon, who was David's son, king of Israel. And so we've got Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon attributed to him. And so we learn a lot from his experiential capital, what he experienced as he was kind of on this empirical journey to find out meaning of life. And this particular message is on meaning beyond work. So when you got a job, how do you have meaning in it when you work? I was talking to Tony and Chief this morning, and Chief told me he retired a year ago, September 1st, 46 years as in law enforcement, but now he works, he said, for Tony. And I asked him, what kind of boss she is, but he claimed the 5th. He pleaded the 5th. So anyway, what I want to talk to you about, meaning beyond work, I still teach a course at Texas State University to business students, and they're from all disciplines in the business school of business there, from IT to finance to accounting to management students, marketing students, HR. And so, but to these students, the course, this is a good title, Meaning Beyond Work, but we call the course Purpose Beyond Performance. What's your purpose beyond your performance? And as I talk to these business students, I talk to them about using their business as platform to have a purpose. And so we even explore, that's how we just kind of kick off the course, and it starts, it'll start back up again next week in person. Last semester we had to put it in a can and push it out to students online, but we'll be live in the classroom starting next Monday with business students. And the first thing I'll challenge them with is their life purpose. And they'll actually be developing over the course of the semester a purpose statement. And they'll do a little SWOT analysis on their life purpose. What are your strengths that you're demonstrating to fulfill that purpose? What are the weaknesses, your growth areas? What are the opportunities you still have? And what are some of the threats? And let's deal with those threats to your purpose. Not just why are 7 billion people on the planet, but why are you here? And how can you use your work as an opportunity? So we talk in terms of occupation and vocation. Your occupation is what you do to put beans on the plate, to turn the lights on. Your vocation is your calling. If you're a follower of Jesus, you have a calling on your life to love like Christ. It's called the Great Commandment. We're to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. And we're to fulfill the Great Commission. That's our vocation. That's our calling. Do you know an interesting Barna study recently discovered that 51% of Christians who are sitting in chairs on Sunday mornings are not even sure what the Great Commission is. And it's what Jesus gave his disciples before he left, to go make disciple makers as you go about your daily life. And that means in your traffic patterns, at work, on your way to Starbucks, at Starbucks. Make a disciple. That's how you make life purposeful. And that's exactly what Solomon's talking about here. He's going to contrast, really, this whole idea of occupation versus vocation. That regardless of your occupation, what's going to give you meaning is your vocation as you're fulfilling your calling through whatever it is you do. So we're actually in chapter 2. And as I mentioned, this is the wisdom literature. So there's a lot of imagery in the Hebrew. Originally, it was written in Hebrew. It's a lot of poetry, Hebrew poetry. Hermann Gunkel, he was a German theologian. He unlocked the key to Hebrew poetry was parallelism of thought. It's not necessarily rhyming, but it's kind of a parallel thought, which is basically you're just saying something in a different way. You're saying it over in a different way. And Solomon uses poetry and a lot of imagery and, these repetitive or recurring metaphors all the way through. And we'll kind of unpack some of those as we even go through here, chapter 2, and talk about meaning beyond work. So if you have your outline, you can follow along with me to find meaning beyond our work. So in verse 17, he says, "So I hated life." Wow, what a statement. I hated life. He's pretty honest, right? Which is kind of interesting. He was referred to at the time as probably the wisest man on the planet at the time and the wealthiest in his day. Built a huge kingdom. But it's interesting that he concluded that he hated his life. The Hebrew word sanah, another way you can translate it is, I did not love living. The word for life there can also be translated living. I did not love living, and here's why. Because the work, the ma'asha, the work, the business that I was in under the sun was grievous to me. Now, Solomon worked hard for what he had. I mean, he built the first temple, and he built a lot of stuff under the sun. And he said it was grievous, rah. It was, later in verse 21, it's translated misfortune. The same Hebrew word, unpleasant, the work that I was doing under the sun. Now, that's a metaphor that's used recurringly 29 times in Ecclesiastes. And it really refers to a closed system without God. He found if he's trying to live life without God in a closed system where there is no God, it was meaningless. It was empty. It was grievous. It was unpleasant. It was misfortune, which is kind of an anonym. This word, ra, is the anonym of tob, which is good. When God created, he said it was good. Well, this is the anonym. This is the opposite. So here's the key. It's in your outline. If I fill up my life with work, in this closed system without a God, I find my work is filled with despair. Now, a good translation of that Hebrew word is no hope. That's pretty hopeless. In verse 20, we jump down, "So my heart, my leb, the center of my being, begin to, ya'ash, have no hope, to despair. I begin to despair over all my toilsome labor, amal, which means trouble. There's just a lot of trouble if I'm toiling under the sun, the shemesh, without God, as if there is no God. So how do we flip that script? How do we make life worth living? And this is even a part of what, I challenge my students at Texas State, is to, regardless of what you're doing to make your income, what's your purpose? What's your purpose? And to think about that. Now, I've tied my purpose to my name, Lewis Vale Alexander, Lewis, lovingly equipping wise, influential servants. So that's part of my purpose. So when Daryl said, hey, can you cover for me on August 15th, this is part of why I'm on the planet, is you guys are wise, influential servants. So Lewis, lovingly equipping wise, influential servants, that's part of my purpose. Vale, V-A-L-E, my middle name, valuing all life experiences. I want to value all life experiences. That's part of purpose. I want to value your life experiences. Where did you fall in a ditch? Because if I fall in that same ditch, I'm calling you, okay? How'd you get out? That's a part of purpose and part of flipping the script as we go about our life traffic patterns. Valuing all life experiences. And then the Alexander part of my name, alleviating loneliness. I don't want people to be alone. It's not good to be alone. For the X, I had to go into my Greek, Christos, alongside. I need Jesus alongside me because he's in me. He's the hope of glory, right? Christ in you, the hope of glory. Paul said in Colossians 1:27. The ND is I need disciplines in my life. I need to study the Word, memorize the Word, meditate on the Word, do the book. I need those disciplines, and the ER is enrich relationships. So that's a part of my purpose. I tied it to my name just to remind myself every day why I'm on the planet. That's a way to flip the script, to make your life meaningful, to fulfill your vocation, your calling, regardless of your occupation. Here's a little anecdotal story about that. So one of my trips home to Belize, I was in the Belize City airport, because you fly through Houston usually to go to Belize City. And I'm waiting in the airport, and I observe people. I don't know, you got people watchers in the room? Am I talking to the right group? You like to watch people? And so I'm observing this couple, and they caught my attention because they seem to like each other. And that's sometimes unique, when a couple actually likes each other, they sit close. I mean, this is good. This is a good indicator in the room. I'm seeing couples sit close to each other. So that caught my attention. And so we're waiting, for our little puddle jumper. We're about to fly down to Placencia. Takes about a half hour on a 16-passenger little jet. So we're waiting there, and I introduced myself to them. I said, my name's Lewis. They said, Phil and Wendy. I said, well, what are y'all doing? And they said, well, we're celebrating our honeymoon. The second marriage for both of them. And I noticed they were eating Cheetos and drinking Coke Zero. And so I just made a little mental note of that. And I said, where are you guys going? Well, we're going to Placencia. I said, where are you staying? What's your resort? And they said, Turtle Inn, which is a fancy, swanky thing. It's the Capallo family own it. And so, they got a little helipad. It's like a 5-star thing, which we're not. We got cabanas on the beach. That's what we've got. And we named it Buried Treasure Beach. But what I did, I drove by, after we got down there, I drove by and picked up some Cheetos and Coke Zero on my way as I was driving up the peninsula. And I thought, I'm going to take this to Phil and Wendy Graham. And so I got a couple of bottles of Coke Zero and a couple of bags of Cheetos. And in Belize, you don't have any fancy foo-foo bags or anything like that. It's a developing country. But I found a bucket. So I put the Coke Zeros and the Cheetos in the bucket, wrote them a personal note, hey, great to meet you guys in Belize City. Hope you have a wonderful honeymoon. If there's anything that I can do for you while you're on the peninsula, call me. Here's my number. And enjoy the Cheetos and Coke Zero. Thought you might need a little energy on your honeymoon. Well, they called me up that night, and they said, can we take you to dinner? I said, yeah, that'd be great. So I said, I know a great place. We'll go. We'll meet. And you know what they asked me? Why did you buy us Cheetos and Coke Zero? I said, well, I just noticed you seem to be enjoying it in the airport, so I thought you might need a little extra energy. And, I mean, they're still curious, okay? And they're pressing me. And it opened up the gospel. You know, I told them about Jesus, and Jesus seemed to keep up with people. And seemed, what was this? Jesus had a occupation. Remember what it was? He was a carpenter. Better translation of the Greek, repair remodeler. He was a fix-it. He could fix stuff. But what is a carpenter doing down at the lake? Well, he's getting to know Peter, James, and John. They were fishermen. That was their occupation. But he's about to call them into a different vocation, okay? They're about to be about making fishers of men, right? They're about to have a different purpose. They've been practicing catching fish. They're about to be catching people for the kingdom of God. I mean, what's Jesus doing at the tax collector's office? Well, he's meeting this guy by the name of Matthew, okay? And it wasn't the first time he met Matthew, because Matthew wasn't about to follow him if it was only the first time he met Matthew. He's investing. He's knowing and truly knowing those people. And so they said yes when he called them. And so I was able to tell them all that. The bar is so low. Cheetos and Coke Zero got me the open door for my vocation, my calling. Now, I mean, I've generated income, and we had a wedding venue for a while, the Drinking Tree Inn. I mean, we had a landscaping stuff, But I mean, I've been working with Great Commandment Network and Relational Values Alliance for about 30 years, but I've always had kind of side stuff going on. But my calling is to fulfill the Great Commission, and by living the Great Commandment, loving God and loving others. And so the bar's pretty low. They asked me, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, well, you guys are on your honeymoon. Why do you want to spend it with me? I mean, I could show you some really great falls. And so we did. We spent the next day together. And again, they're just wanting to know more, and they're very curious. And I got to tell them more about the gospel. As we were leaving the falls, they said, well, can we take you to dinner tonight? And I finally had to put a boundary and say, look, you aren't here to be with me. You're here to be on your honeymoon. But we became friends on Facebook, so, it's definitely official. And they sent me a message not too long ago. He's going to be reassigned. He's in the military to Killeen. So they wanted to reconnect. The bar is so low on finding purpose and meaning. Cheetos and Coke Zero. That's how you flip the script. The second principle, if I fill my life with work, I find my inheritance is a misfortune. That it is not fulfilling. It's the rach. It's the same word that's used for grievous. It's unpleasant. It's not good. And Solomon says here, for a man may do his work, his amal again, his toilsome labor, with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then he must leave all he owns to someone who has not amaled, who's not worked for it, who hasn't gone through the toilsome labor that he went through to get it. And he said, this too is meaningless. It's a vapor. Literally, that Hebrew word is a vapor. It's like a breath. It's a breath. I mean, think about the number of times you've had a breath over the course of your life. He said, it's just like a breath. It's like spittle that comes out of your mouth. It's a vapor. The metaphor then, it's meaningless. And it's great misfortune. It's raw. It's not good. It's unpleasant. So how do you flip that script? How do you make your inheritance something that lasts? Because we know about his son, Rehoboam, squandered his wealth and split the kingdom. So how do we make... So when I talk to business students, I talk in terms of legacy. Not just what's going to be on your tombstone, but beyond the grave. What do you want people to gossip about you? What do you want them to remember about you? But not just that, but even short-term legacy. What are you leaving behind when you leave behind your current role? What's your legacy? And so with my children, I have 3 adult kids, now 6 grandkids. I wanted my kids to have a legacy. So I'm confident today, if you met any of my 3 adult kids on the street, one thing I'm confident that they could do for you is if you were celebrating something, they could rejoice with you. If you were mourning some loss, experiencing sorrow, they could comfort you at the point of your pain. One of the things I wanted to make sure my kids took away as a part of a legacy that would last, imprinted on their hearts, was Romans 12:15. Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. So here's how we did it. Here was the strategy. Sitting around the dinner table at night, I would ask my kids 2 questions. It's called the high-low game. What was your high point today? And they had an answer. I mean, we have a high point. It's a spectrum every day, but there's a high point. Something that went well today. What was it? What was it? What's your best thing? And that's such an important thing because that's what we can be grateful for. That's what we can be grateful for. That's where true joy comes from, is that just out of gratitude. So there was, it wasn't, I won the lottery every day, but what was of this day, what was your high point? And we would enter into that. We would lean into that with one another. We would rejoice with one another over whatever that answer was. Well, I passed English test today. Woohoo! We were sweating that. We prayed about that. Woohoo! Passed that test. And then we do a round of what's your low point. Again, not every day sky's falling in. But what was your disappointment today? What was your low point? What would you have hoped happened differently? And then we would lean into that and care about that. And sometimes weep about whatever that was. That girl broke it off with me. That was a dark day. Or I didn't do as well on that math test as I had hoped. That was maybe a bad day. So learning to rejoice and learning to weep. Now, in my youngest son, I began to really observe him, that legacy growing in his heart. When he was about in the 5th grade, we were at a wrestling match, and Aaron's always been really tall. He's 6'5". He got all the recessive genes, I like to say. And he always had good leverage on people when he was wrestling, trying to keep up with his older brother, took up wrestling. And he had pinned this kid in 5th grade on the mat, and, he came up into the stands, and he's all proud of himself, all puffed up, sits by me. He looks down at his opponent, and his opponent's actually disappointed about the loss. He's actually weeping. You know what Aaron does next? He gets up and goes and sits by that guy, puts his arm around him, comforts him. The guy he just crushed on the mat, cared for him. You know what? I was even more proud of that. The fact that, wow, he's getting this. He's getting this empathy thing, learning how to hurt with other people. In high school, he went from Cedar Park High School to a college preparatory school, and so he had to go through this whole admissions thing, and the admissions officer told me, I asked your son 2 questions. The first question was, Aaron, what do you like about yourself? You know what he said? He said, I don't know what you would say, what you like about yourself. But here's what he said. He said, I like that I'm compassionate. She was impressed by that answer, that he was compassionate. She said, the second question I asked him, she said, Aaron, what do you not like about yourself? How would you answer that? What do you not like about yourself? You know what he said? What's not to like? He's not, he doesn't lack for confidence. But when he turned 26, he called me up. He said, Dad, remember my buddy Tony from high school? I said, yeah, that kid that ate us out of house and home. Yeah, that kid. Well, his mom died. And I'm going to meet him at Chili's. And wondered if you could join us at Chili's. And his dad's going to be there. So here we are. I'm sitting by my son, sitting across from Tony and Tony's dad. And Aaron's starting to comfort Tony and weep with Tony over the loss of his mom. And then expresses to Tony's dad, I really regret you lost your life partner. And then Aaron turns to me and says, Dad, what do you feel for Tony and his dad? See, it had flipped, Now he's coaching me. And that by then, your kid's got it. Legacy is happening. I talked to Aaron just earlier this past week, and he's in Qatar. And he's 5 years now into the Air Force, and he's on a B-52, trying to support in Afghanistan. He's a wizzo. So at least part of me feels a little confident that we got somebody full of compassion who's pushing the buttons. He's going to think about collateral damage. He's going to think about those kind of things. But that's how you flip the script. Our inheritance can't just be stuff that we're going to leave behind for somebody who didn't earn it. It's got to be beyond that. It's got to be what we write in their hearts. That's our legacy. If I fill my life with work, I find my mind and body cannot rest. Am I talking to the right group? Any of you stay up at night or wake up in the middle of the night worried about stuff? This is part of Solomon's empirical journey here. He's just discovering, he's observing what's going on through his hard labor. He's having some induction and from that and deduction from that and testing it and evaluating what's going on. And he says all of his days, this guy who works, his work is filled with pain and grief. Even at night, his mind does not rest. So again, this is poetry, this is imagery. It's really, the Hebrew word is leb. Instead of his mind, it's his heart. And the word rest there means literally to lie down. So the image or the picture that he's painting here is his body is lying down, but his heart is still standing up, okay? His heart is still churning. And, some of you can relate to that. It's just really hard to have peace and hard to have rest. So how do you flip that script? And it's kind of interesting here because he says that this one Hebrew word for pain, that's translated pain here, all of his days, his work is pain. Makob can be translated sorrow. It's the same Hebrew word used in Isaiah 53 verse 4 that talks about the suffering servant, Jesus, who carried our sorrow. So it's an interesting contrast to think about life under the S-U-N versus life under the S-O-N. That if we have life and live under the S-O-N, we can flip the script and have a sense of life purpose. That life can have meaning. That it's not just a breath, not just a vapor, not just the spittle out of our mouths. When we decided to come back here, and we live in a fifth wheel at Sunset RV Park, Lacey decided to do Instacart. Anybody get your groceries through Instacart? So basically, it's just you're like an Uber driver, but you deliver groceries, okay? So she's kind of a sophisticated entrepreneur because she wakes up at 5 in the morning. They start dropping batches about 6. And, she's searching Leander, and usually this H-E-B over in Leander. And she's assessing, how much she can, as a businesswoman, how much she can make, how long it's going to take her to go, how many items they're ordering, how long it's going to take her, she has to calculate in her head, kind of in the immediacy, because she's competing against other Instacart shoppers. And so she's got to do all this assessment of how many items, how long it's going to take her, how far the drive is going to be, and then what's her profit going to be after their tip. She's got to do all that in the immediacy and select the batch before somebody else grabs it up, okay? So there's a lot of toilsome labor in that. But how do you find purpose in that? All right, here's a cool story. Another cool anecdotal story recently that happened. So she gets this one item, and this lady has ordered some sunflowers. And she wants them delivered to her mom. And she lives in Ohio. And her mom lives out in Lago Vista. And she wants these flowers. So Lacey grabs up that batch. It's just one item. She runs to H-E-B. And they're going to tip her well because she's driving all the way out to Lago Vista. And so she gets there, and the sunflowers are droopy, just kind of bleh. And she's like, I don't want to deliver these to somebody. So she's looking around. She finds a really pretty bouquet with sunflowers in it. So she takes a snapshot of that, texts it to this client and shopper. No, she's a shopper. To this daughter, and the daughter loves them. So the daughter texts back and says, hey, when you deliver those sunflowers, will you tell my parents they are my sunshine and that she's coming to visit them? Because she hadn't seen them since COVID. So it'd been about a year and a half since she's seen them, and she's coming to visit. And so she's delivering these sunflowers in this bouquet. And you know what Lacey told her? Because some of you know Lacey, she's a vocalist and a bassist. She said, I'll do you one better. I'll actually sing them. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. And so while Lacey's driving out to Lago Vista, she's even making new lyrics related to, coming to visit and that sort of thing. So when she gets to Lago Vista, the man is sitting in his garage, and Lacey walks up, are you so-and-so? Yes. Is your wife here? Yes. So he goes and gets the wife, and the wife, you know what she's doing? She's actually talking to the daughter who ordered the flowers, talking to her on her iPad. So they come to the door. Lacey presents the sunflowers and sings a song. The daughter starts crying. The mom starts crying. Lacey starts crying. They have this moment, okay? See, that's where meaning in life is. That's when you move beyond an occupation to your vocation, to your calling. That's where true fulfillment comes through connection, as we're able to connect with people. That's true meaning. That's when we make our jobs, our work, significant and fulfilling and joyful and purposeful. All right, this last point, he says, if I fill my life with work, I find my motives are oftentimes wrong. And so we're kind of scrolling forward to chapter 4, verse 4, where he says, and I saw that all labor and achievement. Again, these are just recurring themes he uses, amal and ma'asha, labor and business. When I saw that my labor and business springs from man's envy of his neighbor, kana, jealousy, zeal. He says, this is meaningless. This is the vapor and chasing after the wind. And this expression is also recurring throughout Solomon, this vexation of spirit. It's empty. So how do we flip that script? We flip that script by realizing we are to work for the benefit of others. We're supposed to do what we're supposed to be doing without being told, with a good attitude, for the benefit of others. So we may have some things oftentimes at work that we don't like to do, the got-tos. Hopefully we have more get-tos in our work that we're motivated, but our motivation should be for the benefit of others, not just accumulating wealth that we're going to leave to someone who may not be a good steward of it, but the purpose of even our compliance at work and even our seek to be qualified for different roles and responsibilities is to benefit other people, to fulfill our vocation, our calling, which is to live the Great Commission, to make disciples who make disciples who make disciples through the Great Commandment, loving God and loving others around us. You know, I was on a plane a few years ago. I was flying from Charles de Gaulle in Paris to Istanbul in Turkey. And I was there just to do some training with a group. But I was seated for that 4.5-hour flight next to a Turkish businessman who had been working in Paris selling forklifts. And so I'm sitting by this guy for 4.5 hours, so I just asked him a human interest question. We're very different people. He's a Turkish businessman, a Muslim. I'm Christian, American. But I asked him a human interest question. I said, tell me about one of your life celebrations. And he went on about 45 minutes just telling me about one of his high points in life. It was around meeting his wife. And so, you know what I did? I entered into that celebration with him. I rejoiced with him. And we had a human connection, a heart connection. Even though we're from different parts of the planet, we connected over his celebration. And you know, he then asked me, what do you do? I said, well, I teach people how to love each other, which he was just kind of taken back by that statement. You what? I said, I teach people how to love each other. I said, I've been consulting with an American business. The CEO, here's what the CEO wants to do. He wants to use his business platform to restore the L word to the workplace. He said, what's the L word? I said, love. This CEO wants to remove fear out of the hearts of his 2,500 employees and restore love. That's a huge calling, isn't it? He's using his platform for a purpose in doing that. And that's gone down through the organization, out the front door to the customers. Okay, that's a pretty good business plan. And so I'm sharing this with this guy named Mutlu, this Turkish businessman, and he is just shocked because he was actually reading a Tom Clancy novel on how self-serving American businesses are. And so he's very intrigued and curious and begins to press my questions. And I got to share the gospel with him. I said, well, this is actually a Christian businessman who owns this company. And I mean, I told him Jesus stories for another 3 hours on the plane. And we swapped emails, and I kept telling him Jesus stories. He had never heard the Jesus story about Jesus washing his disciples' feet. I mean, he was just intrigued about a rabbi doing that for his students. And so very curious. See, that's how you flip the script. That's how you make your work meaningful as we live under the SON and fulfill his great commission. If you haven't received Christ in your handout, would you just pray along with me? And if you have, just pray along with me and just kind of recommit that you will take up your cross today to follow Jesus. Dear Jesus, just pray in your heart. Dear Jesus, thank you for loving me even though I'm a sinner. And I'll add in there, Lord, I have had wrong motives sometimes in business, seeking to accumulate things, seeking to store up wealth that's not going to last. I ask for your forgiveness. I believe you died for my sin and that you rose from the dead. I trust you as my Savior and follow you as my Lord from this day forward. Amen. If you've prayed that prayer, you're a follower of Jesus. You've got a true vocation and true calling on your life to love like Christ, to make disciples who make disciples, to live a legacy, have a life beyond just performance as you seek to live under the SON, under the sun.